Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar. I'm Lisa Beth Doyle, Manager of Health and Wellness at Always Health Partners. And today's topic is maximizing the benefits of small group fitness. And that's with one of our vendors called SplitFit, which we'll tell you more about. Our agenda for today, we'll introduce our presenter, discuss benefits of strength training, small group training, particularly in today's environment that's remote for so many people. We'll have a demonstration, and then we'll tell you about a special program with SplitFit that's for Always Health Partners members, and then we'll certainly wrap up with some Q&A. Next slide, please. Our presenter for today is Will Campbell. Will Campbell is a certified strength and conditioning specialist, and he's a certified trainer with over 10 years of training experience. He has a bachelor's of science in exercise physiology. He's also been an MRI technologist specializing in various kinds of imaging. He's a general manager at Beacon Hill Athletic Club in Brookline, and he really has a passion for specific programming around strengthening, mobility, movement integrity, athletic performance, and also bridging the gap between the medical and fitness worlds. He's worked with groups of all ages, and he, just personal note on Ben, he lives with his wife and children, and he really likes spending time with his family, playing golf, lifting weights, going out, and loves the Patriots and the Celtics. So without further ado, here is Will.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for that very nice introduction. I appreciate that. I'm really happy to be here today. So thank you to Always for allowing me this opportunity. So quick, just before we start, obviously this is an informational webinar only. If you have any questions or concerns about engaging in physical activity, please consult your provider, your primary care provider, before starting a new exercise program. So I just wanted to get started here just about the general benefits of strength training, which I'll also call resistance training kind of interchangeably, just so you know when I say resistance training and strength training. Those will be the same words for the purposes of this webinar. Now, we know the general benefits. These are all very well studied. Some of them, I'll just list them, are fighting osteoporosis, osteoporosis meaning like bone mineral loss as you age, fighting things like osteopenia and sarcopenia, meaning muscle loss as you age. Strength training and resistance training help to fight obesity, type 2 diabetes. We know now more recently with its help with decreasing anxiety and depression symptoms, boosting metabolic rate, reducing chronic low back pain, reducing blood pressure. The list really does go on and on. I tried to get it concise, and I found a list that was 22 to 30 items long about the benefits of strength training. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to point you in a specific direction. But I do have one study that I would like to highlight. There's a recent study done that the New York Times just published in January of 2020, linking strength training and heart health, which I thought was very interesting. So obviously we know the overall health, but this specifically was heart health. In this study, they actually followed a group of people for about 10 to 15 years. And at the end of that, what they found was after that 15-year period, these over 1,000 or so people, 27% of the participants, as you would imagine, now had developed some kind of heart disease. But what they found was the incidence was much, much higher in men, believe it or not. But in those men, people who had more muscle mass had better heart health. So there was a direct link between holding on to muscle mass as you age, and this age group was 40 to 45 to about 60 to 65 over those 10 to 15-year period. And so that link between muscle mass and heart health, I thought was very interesting, particularly during these times. And this did come out pre-coronavirus, at least here in the United States, where we know that heart health is so important to fighting various diseases. So I did want to highlight that study as we started. More specifically to these times in remote-based training, what I found, a lot of this has been more my anecdotal experience over the last 6 months. I've been training my clients more remotely. I'd say about 60% of my clientele is trained remotely, and some in small groups. And what I've noticed is a lot more session adherence. Interestingly enough, being able to connect with people at home, they seem to be able to just kind of jump on the phone call or the Zoom call or the Skype call much more easily than having to get in their car and get all the way to the gym or their studio or wherever they need to go. And this kind of leads to more accountability through convenience, which has been a nice little unintended effect of the remote training. What I've also found is I'm delivering more of a health coaching to my clients. You know, I'm a strength and conditioning coach by profession, but this overall kind of what I call like a holistic approach to their life via the remote platform, because I really see the person in their everyday environment, you know, to seeing their kids in the background, getting themselves ready for school and work, and all the different struggles that come with day-to-day life. And I feel like I'm able to reach them a little more personally and how I can help them in their health and wellness remotely. So those are kind of some surprising benefits that I saw in the last 6 months with my clients. And then as a group, if you are meeting as a group or a couple, you know, always is accountability. You know, people seek out training for accountability, but when you do it with another person, it really does help hold you accountable. And then lastly, I'll just say the social engagement is extremely important. We know that we've all been more isolated than ever from our loved ones and our friends and our family. But this allows you to, when you're getting on a call, even doing something like this webinar, you have some kind of engagement socially that you can maintain. And then when you kind of combine that with exercise, it can be pretty powerful. It definitely gives you an increased awareness of your exercise performance as well when you're working out with someone else, and you're going to work out a little bit better on a little bit higher level, it seems. So we can go to the next slide here. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to demonstrate kind of what I do for a lot of my remote clients, a lot of the small groups and the individual clients that I'm training. And I want to just explain first, before we don't jump into each movement, the general theory here. As we go down, you can see I have a multi-joint movement pattern of combination movements that I use for the most part, and then I individualize it to the client or the people that I'm training. But for the most part, we go through step by step here with each movement pattern. And the reason I use movement patterns, you've probably heard before, you know, training in terms of training your chest or your back or your biceps or your quadriceps. I tend to think more in movement patterns because it's more functional to real life. So I very much focus on that functional training. So we're going to go through a squat pattern, a hinge pattern, a push, a pull with the upper body for push and pull, and then focusing the core. And then I threw carry in there because that's kind of part of the core, doing loaded carries or carrying something. And then for each movement, I'm going to go through a progression and a regression. So I'm going to show you sort of the easiest part of the movement, or the start, the way you could start doing the movement first, and then how you can make it a little bit harder. And everyone's going to be in different categories. I was asked a question before about sets and reps and how many we should be doing. I wouldn't worry too much about that right now, because that's something that would be worked out with your own individual intensity of what you would need. But generally, just getting these movements in, and times where we're really kind of stuck inside not moving, is very important. So I'm going to start with the squat movement. We're going to go through 3. So the first thing I like to do here, and you'll have to excuse me because I'll need to get my camera set up to different positions. And I am here at my home studio at the gym. We're going to do just your regular average old squat here. But what I like to do first of all is I like to raise my heels up. I think that's a really key part of doing the squat. It's going to allow my ankle to be in a better position to squat. So you can see my feet are raised up here on this black padding. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to squat all the way to the bench. And I know I have an exercise bench, but these tend to be just about the same height as your average couch at home or your chair. Okay, so we're going to squat all the way down. And then notice with my upper body here, I'm kind of reaching out with my hands and then standing up nice and tall. And this allows me to get into a good squat position, but not too deep, and standing right up. So of course, very, very functional movement here, right? And so the way to progress that would be first just to kind of take the couch or the bench away. So I'm going to move over to my padding here in the middle of the room. And I'll still keep my heels elevated for this. But now I'm gonna try to squat down just as far as I can go, and this feels good for my lower body, right? I don't wanna do this so that my knees are feeling it too much or my back, but the heels raise should allow you to keep those heels down and sit as far as you can back. Now, if that's easy for you and you're someone who does squats a lot, what I like to do to vary intensity is I go from what's called a bilateral movement, and that's bilateral meaning both legs, to a unilateral movement. And I just go back to my couch or whatever I have there in my home, and I get my foot elevated, and we do this as a split squat, okay? So now I just have a light foot on the back here, and of course now I have to use my balance, my proprioception to complete the squat, and then I would have to go now to my other side. So there's 3 movements you can do for the squat movement right away. Then we're gonna jump right into the hinge, so I'm gonna go back down onto the mat here. And hinge movement, just so you know what a hinge is, it's basically a movement that happens at the hips when we're sitting back this way. So it's typically a movement where you're picking something up off the ground. If you're thinking about a gym environment, it's like a deadlift. So we're just gonna do a basic bridge, even though we're not standing. This is a good way to just practice hinging at your hips, again, safely. You can just use anything, any area you have at home. A rug would do, even if you don't have an exercise mat. And we just come up into a bridge, pushing through our heels here. We're trying to feel the glute squeeze and the hamstring squeeze here. And just to note, when you're doing a hinge, usually you're using the glute and the hamstring muscles in the back. When you're doing a squat, like we were doing before, you tend to use more of the quadriceps in the front. So again, we don't talk about muscle groups, you talk about movements, but the movements tend to hit the muscles that they need to, okay? And then really easy here to make this a little bit tougher, we just get on a single leg. And we can bridge with a single leg, okay? Show you on both sides here. Just like so, okay? The third of that progression, if we wanna get a little bit harder, we bring a little bit of balance into it, a little bit more proprioception. I'm gonna move away from the camera so you can see me a little bit better here. Let me just tilt that up actually. Is gonna be a single leg, what I call a single leg deadlift or single leg balance. So we're gonna go right to the side here and just reaching and balancing on that single leg. And then if we wanna stay on that one leg to make it more challenging, you can always come to sort of a kickstand in between if you need to reestablish your balance. And again, I'm feeling this in my glute and my hamstring muscle. So very functional. I use that one actually a lot, quite a bit with my clients, the single leg deadlift and its variations. Next is a push. So we're gonna go now focus a little bit more on the upper body. So I'm gonna kind of get to a wall here. And really, I'm gonna use 3 push-up variations for this. The first one being a wall push-up. Very simple. Get yourself nice and close to a wall. Get an angle enough back so you can feel some resistance when you come down, and then push away. And I found that a lot of folks just have trouble like just extending their arms against the resistance. So really just working to push your arms nice and straight in this position. And of course, being able to control it down here on the way down, okay? Simple wall push-up. That's super easy for you. We go back to the couch or the bench. Again, something that's not too high off the ground, but raises you up a little bit. And we do our incline push-up. So this takes away, essentially what we're doing here is we're kind of just working our way through gravity. Right now, gravity's kind of cutting through me at 45 degrees, so it makes it a little bit easier than if we're on the ground, right? And I'm able to come all the way down, and press all the way up. Things you want to think about here is not flaring your elbows out, you know, keeping your elbows nice and solid and in this position, pressing through the bench that way. And then lastly, as we all know, floor push-ups. Now, I told the group yesterday that most people don't have any business doing regular floor push-ups. A lot of people tend to butcher these, so I usually just do kneeling push-ups with a lot of my clients until they gain strength. So I'm on my knees here, hands go a little in front of the shoulders, I come down, I press up. Okay, very simple here. So those are your push movements. A lot of push-up variations we can do as folks get better at that. The pull movement is a little more difficult to do with just body weight stuff at home. So what I do is I'm going to pull in my kind of props here, and on that slide you'll see there's creative items that we can use to increase intensity or just to use to do the movements. So what I've used a lot with folks at home is a simple backpack. Okay, we load this up to as little or as much as you need, and we can use it for many different exercises. So the first one I'll show you with the pull is a simple rowing exercise. So I'm just going to stagger my stance here, get my foot back. I'm going to hang the backpack down. I'm going to keep myself nice and level, and I'm just going to pull. And then notice I'm bringing my upper arm just in line with my torso, and I'm squeezing my upper back muscles here. Okay, let me do that on both sides. And you would hit that on both sides, okay? Another one we can do with the backpack for a pull, and this is another combination move, meaning multiple movements in one, is a curl to a press. So I'll usually do a little staggered stance for this, so I have a nice balanced position. I'll curl the backpack up to my chest, and then we'll press it overhead, okay? And again, this can be as light or as heavy as you need based on your ability. If you need a little more weight, you can always add some books. I've had clients use everything from big rocks to heavy textbooks in this thing, okay? All right, and that's our curl press. And then moving on here, and of course with the pull too, just to note, you know, if you do have a pull-up bar at home, you can get those installed at home pretty easily. Moving to something like chin-ups or pull-up variations, but I recognize not everybody has those. Moving to the core next. I do something with pretty much most of my clients. It's called the Big Three. It was popularized by Dr. Stuart McGill. I like this a lot because it really focuses on the core stability through the middle of your body, kind of protecting your spine. So a lot of people think about the core as something we need to, you know, work that six-pack or get really explosive. You see a lot of people doing all kinds of med ball throws and things like that. Not that those things are bad, but I tend to think the average person just needs that core stability to be able to function, like I talked about, just the functional training we need for everyday living. So the first movement we're going to do is we're going to work the front part of the core, doing a basic curl up. Now it's not going to look like I'm doing much here, but I'll kind of talk you through it. We're going to have one leg straight. We're going to have our head back on the ground. I'm going to get my hands underneath my low back where that space is between my low back and the ground. And I'm going to lift my head up very slightly, very, very slightly, and just push my lower back into my hands, and we feel that front core light up right away. And then back down. Again, I'm not doing a sit-up per se. I'm actually trying to not have my lumbar spine move that much, and I'm trying to just have my core contract, okay, as I'm doing each one of these. Then for the rotational core or the transverse plane through the middle part of the body, I'm going to do a basic bird dog position. A lot of you guys might have done this in yoga style classes, but getting into this position and being able to hold it without much rocking left to right and holding that balance here is a real core exercise. And I do that for, you know, 15 or 20 seconds or so, the prescribed time on each side. And again, I like holding this isometrically, meaning not moving and just holding. And then for the side core, I like using a side plank variation where we're on our knees. My knees are stacked up, my elbows under my shoulder, and I'm just lifting up and holding right here. Okay, and I would do that on both sides. All right. The last thing I do for the core, like I said, the carry, very functional. And again, this is where I'll use some props at home. I have some gallon jugs of Clorox here. You could use, you know, empty milk gallon containers, fill those with water. Those are plenty heavy. And we literally just carry them, what's called a farmer's carry in the fitness industry. And we just carry these back and forth. And I'm focusing here on my chest being open, my posture being good. And another way to vary this is to just carry one, and we can focus a little more on one side holding stable as we just carry one. Maybe one's a little heavier than the other. And again, this can be done with a backpack as well, but I thought the gallon jugs, you tend to have a nice little handle on them to hold. Okay. And then just the last thing I'll note, you know, all of these things can be varied. As I mentioned with the progression, we can also use things like tempo, moving slower in certain positions, moving faster in certain positions, focusing on holding isometrically versus not holding isometrically, and also rest intervals. You know, how much rest we end up taking. If we put some of these movements together and we do a little bit of less rest, all of a sudden we're getting a little bit of a cardiovascular benefit there as well. So that's what I have for the demonstrations. I think we'll turn it back over to Lisa Beth.
Hi, thank you. Thank you. So before we wrap up, I want to make sure that I give folks a chance to ask any questions of Will that you may have. There's a little question box over to the right of your screen if you want to put anything in there, and we'll give folks a moment to do that. right. Let's see, I do have one question for you, Will. And the question is, can strength training help with weight loss?
That's a great question. And I probably should have put that as one of the many reasons at the beginning of my discussion, but absolutely it can. So I did mention metabolic rate. It'll increase your metabolic rate. It will do that for you. So I've told my clients this: muscles are carb eaters. they like to eat energy. So when you have muscle, it's very healthy to have muscle because it's constantly has a metabolic process about it that is going to allow for more calorie burning. Now, I will say with weight loss, it does take a very important look at your diet in order to have proper weight loss. So I wouldn't say strength training in a vacuum on its own is like the key to weight loss, but I would say a good strength training routine or a healthy strength training routine is important for weight loss, can help accelerate weight loss with a solid diet program.
Excellent, thank you. And I have one, okay, here we go. How often would you recommend strength training? And should you alternate on days with cardio or do both on the same day?
That's another great question, very common question. I tend to start with the minimum need for the person. So for example, if I have someone who is totally sedentary, 2 days a week strength training to start is plenty. A combination of these movement patterns, sets and rep ranges, and then I probably mix in cardiovascular training specifically on like 1 or 2 other days. And then we'd slowly build up to 3 or 4 days. If you're kind of the average person who is kind of active, maybe you play like a sport like tennis or something like that, you might want to be strength training more like 3 times a week at least, upwards of 4. But I recognize, again, this is the whole idea behind this health coaching concept. I recognize people's lives and schedules are just kind of all over the place. Right? Normally they are, and now it's even harder. So you want to do the minimum amount that you can do in your life. I talk about with my clients needing a floor. So you want to create this floor of activity that you always have that you don't drop beneath. So for you, 2 days a week of strength training is feasible. That's your floor. That's what you want to do. And then you asked the question about when should you do cardio. I commonly see people making this error. You want to be doing cardiovascular things usually after you strength train. If you're combining it in the same day, you want to do your strength training work like this, and then you want to maybe hit that bike or elliptical or run afterward, or staggering it on different days.
Great. Now let's see here. How often do you suggest working out each week and for how long? And I actually have a similar question, which is then, and how do you know if you're doing enough reps?
Okay, so that's 2 separate questions. Is that one question or 2 questions?
Sort of 2 questions. Well, let's start with how often do you suggest working out each week and for how long?
So that's a good question. I believe there are like standard guidelines, minimum guidelines on exercise. I believe they've been increased to 30 minutes for 5 days a week. But you can definitely find that information online as far as standard guidelines. But I would recommend, again, I think I said this in my last answer, that to find what works in your life, the minimum amount that you might need in your life. I stress that because I think what ends up happening is we set this bar way too high sometimes, and we end up coming way short of our goals and we get discouraged and we're not able to hit them. So you want to start small and build, and you want to find the minimum amount for you that's going to work. And I know that's not a direct answer. I wish there was one objective answer for you, but it does work more individual. But I would say you should shoot for 4 to 5 days a week physically active, if you're just talking physical activity in general. And then 2 other days, definitely 1 rest day a week. You got to give yourself a break at least once or twice a week. I do see people overtraining who are training 7 days a week too much, and there is a right balance to that. And then what was the second part of the question there?
It's for how long should I work out? And then there was the similar question, which is how do I know if I'm doing enough reps?
So yes, actually, that's a good question about reps. Is something I meant to mention during my demonstration, which I didn't. I like to go off of a subjective perceived exertion scale. I do this with my clients, and I help my clients develop it for themselves so they can work out better on their own. It's a simple 1 to 10 scale of each set that you do. At the end of the set, you're going to rate it of how hard you worked from 1 to 10. It's called an RPE scale, or a rated perceived exertion scale. You can do a quick Google search on RPE, rated perceived exertion scales, and you can sort of see them. They're usually 1 to 10, very general. For example, I might do 3 sets of 10 on, or 1 set of 10 on the squat. After I'm done with the squat, I evaluate how I feel out of 10. Generally, you should be in that sort of 7, 8 range. I mean, 8 might be pushing it a little bit. You want to be able to do multiple sets, but you don't want to be so exhausted and totally done with your set that you can't do it again. And then you want to see how your body responds days after. So if you do a 7 out of 10 exercise, let's say 3 sets of 10, and the next day you feel your quads so much that you can barely walk and you can't sit and stand up, you're like, okay, maybe I pushed it a little too much. Let me dial back my RPE on my next workout. So it is much of kind of a, you have to play with it and the subjective nature of it with each one. And then that also goes hand in hand with your question about session length. I would say that I would have a good minimum average, or I would say an average of about 30 to 45 minutes. I know that might seem short for some people because everybody's like, oh, I gotta work out an hour. I was at the gym 2 hours today. You wanna have a good plan that sort of is packed into that 45-minute period where you have a good proper warm up, you have a good resistance training practice, you have a little bit of cardiovascular maybe, and then you have like a cool down or a stretch. And you should be able to get that done in about 45 minutes once you get efficient with your routine. It might take you 60 when you're first starting because you're kind of just figuring out what you're doing. But I would say 45 on average is probably a good thing to shoot for.
Great, thank you. And I've got 2 more for you. So the first one is, if I've had an injury, how do I communicate this to my trainer?
You just got to tell them. It's one of the most frustrating things as a trainer, from my perspective, is when clients don't communicate the injury. And I don't know your relationship with your trainer, so I'm not going to judge that. First of all, having a trainer that you have a good rapport with is important. My clients know through having a good rapport with me, hopefully, I would think that they would feel comfortable and safe coming to me saying, hey, Will, I'm just kind of feeling like my shoulder's not feeling right. Maybe we should take those presses out today. And I like to make sure the client or the person on the other side has that ownership and autonomy to be able to say that about themselves, and me not let my ego get in the way and say, oh, well, we got to do presses anyway. It's part of the program. It's, I came up with the program, so it's great. And so I would just say communication is key with your trainer, and that should be established early on in your relationship with your trainer. And when you do go get a trainer, I mean, you're essentially, you should be thinking of yourself as interviewing this trainer when you're first meeting them. You need to make sure that there's someone who you can have a rapport with and you can feel comfortable enough to bring an injury up. So I would just say, bring it up very gently and matter-of-factly. Just say, hey, this is what I'm feeling, and I'm wondering if we can work around it. If the trainer does a good job, they'll find ways to work around it and through it. Or if it's really bad, they'll recommend possibly physical therapy or some other modality for you for that injury. We lost the audio there.
Sorry. Last question I have here is, do you recommend tracking the exercises that you do each day, like some sort of a workout log?
I do, especially if you start. I think it depends on your personality and your temperament. I think that folks who tend to do better with looking back on workouts and seeing how they can improve definitely should do that. If it's something that takes up so much time that you end up scratching notes and you're looking at notes and studying notes before and after and during exercise, that it actually kind of takes away from your training. And again, that's why I say it's personal. I have seen members and clients here where they're just always in either their phone, their app, or their notebook, and I'm like, okay, when are you actually going to exercise? So you got to make sure that you log it so that you know it's there. And so the short answer to that would be, if it helps you, if you think that would help you continue a good exercise practice and feel accomplished by maybe going a little bit heavier the next week than the other. So I would recommend it, but it would be for the right person. You'd have to make sure of that.
Great, thank you. All right, that's a lot of questions. That's all that have come in for now. If folks think of something else after we wrap up for today, we'll be sharing Will's email address to contact him if you have something else that you'd like to discuss with him. So thank you. So something I want to let folks know about is a special split fit program benefit for members of Always Health Partners who have our fitness benefit. This is Will's program. So through our fitness benefit, we offer $300 towards small group trainings from Split Fit. Live instructor-led small group training. You don't have to have a membership with a health club to be able to take advantage of this benefit. Sessions start at $12 a session, and now you can even work out from home with live virtual training. SplitFit has live trainings with some top fitness instructors from over 20 partner clubs. There's a lot of places you can go when it's safe to go in person and you're comfortable to go in person. And you can vary your routine. It's not just one thing. We have training for yoga and bar and cardio and all sorts of things. So there's all sorts of different workouts to keep you interested and motivated. And they do offer free introductory sessions, so you're not obligated. We have the website here. And anything else that you want to add about that, Will, that I should be communicating to folks here?
No, I think that pretty much covers it. Yeah, I believe we're going to be running a special 8-week program soon that you'll probably hear about through Always that you're going to be able to possibly jump into, and it'll be this remote small group training format, and it's going to be very measured from beginning to end. We're going to try to really show results for you guys that this style of training that I described during this presentation can be beneficial to you. So we'd love to see you there.
Great. Thank you very much. So thank you again. This has been great information and recommendations. I really appreciate your time today and the demonstrations. And I hope everyone's come away from Will's presentation with something new and useful that they can incorporate on resistance training to make their workout routine more beneficial, more interesting. We are going to be sending an email, as I said at the close of this presentation, in addition to having Will's contact information. That's also going to have a 3-question evaluation, so please keep an eye out for that. Additionally, the email will have a link to a recording of this presentation, and you can share that with your friends and colleagues. And just one last thing before I wrap up, which is I do want to remind everybody about telemedicine benefits in place from Always Health Partners, as well as a number of other insurance carriers. I know Will briefly mentioned physical therapy, and that's one of those things that in some cases can be done remotely. And just importantly, we do urge everyone to keep up with their appointments, particularly around condition management and for any new concerns. And please contact us or your own carrier's customer service and or your provider if you have any questions about telemedicine. So from both Will and me, thank you all again and enjoy your day.